No matter what kind of challenges we're facing day to day, big, little, we're always seeking more steadiness, a sense of being effective, wanting to be more intentional, because we don't want to be random. We don't want to be reactionary. And to me, what that really means is that we're always seeking balance. And that's really what I think the balance journey is. It's something that we're doing all the time, no matter who we are. But are we doing it mindfully? Are we doing it intentionally? Well, that's what this channel is all about. And I think the problem with seeking balance in today's world is that the whole narrative is almost always about static balance, about two-dimensional, do this and you'll get that. And we don't live like that. We're not made like that. We're much more complex than that. And yet our thinking and our whole perspective is very often that two-dimensional kind of balance. So what we really need is to understand balance in a much more dynamic way. To feel like we can respond to life in a balanced way, we have to actually get good at knowing how to go from confusion to clarity, from chaos to calm in whatever we're facing. We have to be able to be that steadiness within turmoil. So what we'll be learning in this video is essential perspectives that are based on holistic balance philosophies. We'll be looking at how those apply to our balance journey, and I'll be sharing an intention statement for each perspective that we cover. And I think that after watching this, you're definitely going to be more intentional about your journey. By the way, I'm Heidi, and I've been obsessed with fostering balance in my life and relationships for over 50 years. And I'm just here to share what I've learned and support you and encourage you in your own balance journey. So let's dive in. This is the Balance Journey, where we're all about turning challenges into growth opportunities and bringing mindfulness to everyday life. So we'll be talking about the 5 essential perspectives I want to share with you in just a moment, but I just wanted to explain to you what I think an intention statement can do. The intention statements that I'll be sharing with you, I think they'll just help you to remind you of the balance principles that I'm sharing today. They'll just kind of direct your mind, your heart, your spirit, your whole self in where you want to turn in those moments when you're trying to practice these principles in your daily life, and you might just need that sense of bringing you back to some groundedness, okay? So that's what those intention statements will be for. But let's get started with the essential perspective number 1. And that perspective is that all things are seeking balance. They're not just finding it, they're seeking it. And I think that that's such a key word, because if we are able to look at every experience in life, our own health first of all, and then the extension in our lives and in our relationships, when we can say that, wow, anything and everything is seeking balance, that that's just the natural order of things, then we will have a new way of looking at all of our experiences, all of our challenges, and we'll also know where we should go with those things. My first perspective is something that I learned in Macrobiotic health philosophy. This is something that I was raised in from the time I was about 3 years old, and it's related to not just your physical health, but truly your holistic balance. It's an amazing anchor in this whole series of, perspectives that I think really help with balance. So here are the key principles that I learned through the Macrobiotic health philosophy. Your physical health is based on balance of yin and yang, or acidic and alkaline. And depending on what you eat, this can cause imbalances within your body. Your body is the true computer. It tells you by little things, the things that you could call the common cold symptoms, like a runny nose or a headache. It tells you these things, and when we pay attention and we actually don't just cover up the symptom, we can look for ways that we can come back to balance. And in doing so, we start to realize that purging or releasing of any kind of toxins is actually a good thing, even though it's an uncomfortable thing. We are free to make choices, and yet if we understand that balance is in our hands, then we definitely start working with balance in the whole dynamic of it, and we can avoid the intensity that sometimes happens when we keep ignoring that all of these things are just helping us return to a balance. Okay, so how did that apply in my life? Well, my macrobiotic experience made me aware that, I'm in charge. I'm in charge of my balance, and that made me pay attention to my eating choices, my thinking, I just let it expand to, you pay attention to how all things do seek balance, and you play a part in it. And I think that is very essential to our balance journey to understand this principle. Because if we can embrace this, we start seeing our own lives and our own road of the balance journey as just, okay, if I'm facing a struggle or a problem, it's just an opportunity. It's an opportunity for me to choose a return to balance. And whether that's in my physical health, in my relationships, or so forth, I'm going to be able to control the experience of that return to balance. Then you're going to pull that into your journey of what your solutions are going to be. And it's really going to impact a lot. But there might be times when you are trying to apply this principle, you've been doing well, and something particularly challenging hits you. And if you need the help to figure out, how you bring yourself back to your own focus and your own mindfulness, then maybe this intention statement can help you. I accept that all things in my health, relationships, and life are always seeking balance. I am open to trying whatever is needed to soften the intensity of my return to balance, and I believe I am becoming stronger through this. Okay, so we've been looking at the perspective that all things are seeking balance. And we've also touched on the idea that when you're in an imbalance, you're going to feel it as a discomfort. So what I want to talk about in perspective number 2 is that all imbalances start vibrationally. And therefore, we're going to want to use all our aspects to raise our vibration. What do I mean by that? Well, this perspective really comes from my upbringing in Eastern philosophy. And it is grounded in this idea that everything has a vibration, which obviously we know that from quantum physics and so forth. But in terms of a spiritual or more mysterious aspect of just, whether you can document all of this vibration stuff, the idea that everything has a vibration, that all things are part of a whole, and the fact that the universal spirit's vibration is the constant, it's the steadiness, and our vibration, each of us as individuals, is the fluctuating aspect, then it's about finding an active and dynamic harmony between ourselves and that greater aspect. And in moments when we are feeling very uplifted, we're feeling joy, a lot of people find that kind of sense of equilibrium with that kind of vibration when they're in nature and so forth. We know what it feels like. But if we're understanding that imbalances are going to start vibrationally, then it helps us to understand how to move ourselves, not just in physical choices, but also in mental and emotional and spiritual aspects, trying to find ways to bring ourselves back into balance. And I think this is a key for the balance journey, because this is one of those aspects that isn't talked about very much. Although I will say that, there are many Eastern philosophy practices, yoga, meditation, and so forth, that definitely focus in on that aspect of just kind of, centering ourselves and then tuning in. So it's very similar in those practices. But what I'm talking about is your balance journey not requiring you to go to that moment of being in meditation and making it more of an everyday experience and everyday practice. So if we can embrace this idea that imbalances start vibrationally, and then they're definitely going to show up in our experience in some way, then as part of our balance journey, we get to be looking at how to mitigate that kind of discomfort, the kind of suffering that ends up in our experience by vibrationally making those shifts first. How do you do this? Well, in my experience, you definitely focus on processing your own thoughts and emotions. A lot of what we feel about a situation is because we're bringing old emotions with us, old hurts and old pain. So mentally and emotionally being willing to release resentments, judgments. I mean, you can have your resentments, you can have your judgments, but being willing to release them is a huge part of, using your mind, your heart, your spirit, and intentionally making a difference in how this vibration is going to be changing and improving. It's going to affect physical health, your mental health, your emotional health, but you can't skip this step. The vibrational part cannot shift without our willingness. And I think that's the reason it's such an essential perspective, in my opinion. If we're walking through the balance journey of our lives and we understand this, then we always just say, okay, it's dragging me into this experience, but I'm going to face it. I'm going to be with it. I'm going to be in it, because only when we are willing to be a part of it and say, okay, I'm not going to resist it. I don't like it, but it is what it is. Will we be able to actually roll with it much more smoothly and quickly and get through to the other side. So be willing to go through some discomfort to purge toxic stuff that you may not even be aware you need to purge. And just know that being intentional with your mind, your heart, and your spirit is definitely going to reduce the intensity. And this is definitely an aspect where I feel the videos I offer on my channel will help you, because this is how I think, this is how I speak, this is always underlying everything I have done for myself, and therefore what I share with you. So if you are watching the videos that I share, you'll definitely have that encouragement for that mind, heart, spirit collaboration that we do that really makes an impact in your balance journey. And now let's take a look at the intention statement in times when you need to bring yourself back to awareness and mindfulness in this second perspective. I accept that rising to new levels of balance can feel like suffering and discomfort. I am willing to release any blockage, physical, mental, or emotional, for the sake of being in harmony with higher vibration. I believe my soul is aligned with this. And here's the amazing thing. You know, because of how seeking balance works vibrationally, it's actually a foregone conclusion that even if it feels like suffering initially, you are moving towards greater things, greater flow, greater joy, greater holistic health. And that's everything that we really want anyway. So we're moving toward that. It's a foregone conclusion. So facing our challenges in the balance journey is just meaning that we're never going to go back to where we were. We're always going to go vibrationally higher. And that's definitely something that we want to be a participant in. Okay, and so now you might be asking, well, how else can I help myself along this journey? And that's where we come to perspective number 3. Balance is actually our natural state. And therefore, if we prepare an environment that builds it, we're totally going to create a really, really strong foundation for everything that we're doing. This perspective comes from me being a Montessori student and teacher. Dr. Montessori was an Italian scientist who was tagged to create a learning environment for poverty-stricken children in a very poor area of Italy. And in her very careful way, she put together an environment that surprised her and continues to serve children to this day in the Montessori method of education. Here's what we know about what Dr. Montessori realized, that balance is really our natural state. Dr. Montessori saw that a child's normal state was one in which children worked enthusiastically, alone, and together. They treated each other and their learning environment with respect, and they were able to exist in their own community with little direction. She called that normalization, and I call that finding a return to balance. Those children in an environment that they didn't have to feel that they were constantly on guard and constantly in survival mode were able to really flourish. And I just think it's the most beautiful thing. And I feel, as a Montessori student when I was a little girl, and then as a Montessori trained teacher, I can vouch for the fact that, you know, in an environment where our independence is protected and we have freedom, but we also understand the structure and the order, it really makes a difference in the fact that then we actually just naturally come back to our own balance. So if we're looking at how this perspective applies to our balance journey, this idea that balance is our natural state, we can stop looking at, trying so hard to establish more balance. Okay, don't take it in that way. This whole idea of balance is about not being another thing on your checklist, but being an intuitive and natural thing that we will easily return to because we're returning to our normal state. And I think it really makes us come to a place of focusing on personal and home balance, because that is the area in which I feel we have the most say in our environment and what we can control. So even if many things are happening outside our home, or many things are happening, outside of ourselves, if what we're doing is focusing on remembering that balance is my natural state and balance can be my natural state within this home, then we know where we make the impact. And if you want support in that, then what you need is to have the kinds of universal principles underlying whatever you consume. You want to make sure that the things that you're listening to, reading, and learning are things that support this idea. Because if you are watching things too widely, and that's totally everybody's choice, but if we're watching things too widely, we're forgetting because people aren't reminding us, hey, don't worry. It looks really, really like turmoil, but it's okay. Balance is a part of this. I feel like if we can remind ourselves of that in the things that we consume and foster that for our own small circle, then we will continue to maintain that sense of foundational steadiness that we want. And, in creating an environment that you feel builds balance in your personal life and in your home, I'll definitely be making videos that will share tips on those types of things. You'll always want to figure out what balanced order looks like for you. Just balanced order, a sense of freedom, but within structure and order. And it only takes an effort to set things in motion. It's not like you have to constantly keep everything in balanced order. It's where the environment, that prepared environment, is an important aspect of our balance journey. And, everyone contributing to peace and balance in the relationships you're in and in your home life. Just asking yourself, what systems do I need to set up? Those types of things are things that I'll cover in future videos. But in the meantime, there's so many resources everywhere that will help you if you're asking yourself, what can I do to bring more the environment that I need, so that instead of a lot of distractions and instead of a lot of turmoil all the time, there's that sense of balance within my small circle of my home and my life. And as you pursue that, here's a really good intention statement for that. I accept that balance is my natural state. I'm willing to figure out the systems and communications in my home life that create an environment for building balance. I believe I am equipped for this. And before we move on, I really want you to know this. In everything I ever talk about, it's always putting the responsibility on you, the viewer, because who else can do it but you? If you're the person who is really seeking for understanding more about balance and wanting to create that in your environment and in your life, right? But it's important to know that if you're the one doing that work, you are going to see exponential growth in yourself and others. And it's going to be in your thinking processes and your interactions. It is totally going to reward you. I can tell you this from the bottom of my heart, because it is, like I said, I've been practicing this for over 50 years, just finding little tweaks and always being watchful. And it is truly something that you'll continue to blossom in. So even though it's like, wow, why do I have to be the one? Who else is going to do it? You want to do it for yourself. The balance journey is definitely personal, but it's definitely the most rewarding. And you're doing it anyway. You're doing it like we talked about in the beginning, of this video. We're doing it whether we're conscious of it or not. So being mindful is just something that will allow you to recognize that you're doing it for you, and it's totally worth it. So even though we understand that, okay, building an environment to support that is a very important, essential aspect, you might be wondering, well, what do I do once I set up that environment? And that's where we come to perspective number 4. Perspective number 4 is that balance requires being proactive. And you have to take positive action. So this comes from my upbringing in the Aikido practice and philosophy. So that's a martial art that is really a very dynamic, non-combative style. It's much more of a fluid movement and entering into the interaction with the attacker and then redirecting it. I practiced Aikido because my father, again, was someone who loved the entire philosophy behind the practice, and we used to go to Aikido from the time I was like 5 years old until I was about 25. And in the beginning, it was every Saturday morning, getting up, and before breakfast, you would get to Aikido class and you'd spend an hour on the mats. And it trained me in so many things, gave me such a sense of being centered. And that is all part of this idea that balance is something that is an interplay with the dynamics around us. So let's just take a quick look at the principles of Aikido. The translation of the Japanese kanji for Aikido is the way to harmony with the universal spirit. And this philosophy and practice is about entering into the exchange with positive action, which I'll explain in a moment. It is about maintaining low center of gravity and pivoting from your core to maintain balance and allowing the attacking energy to be completed rather than having this combative stop movements as you would see in other blocking and so forth. And as you enter into the interaction with the attacker, you redirect those initial movements to neutralize the threat, and you lead with ki, with universal energy. So for me, Aikido practice gave me a very strong sense of being grounded in the steadiness of ki, of universal energy. From the time I'm 5 years old, every time you're on the mats and the teacher is talking to you about sitting and focusing on your one point, which is like they'll tell you is like 2 inches below your belly button. And so, already I was being trained in this mindful aspect of, like use your thinking to think about this central point of your body and to lead from there. So that was something that became like my DNA. It was just ingrained in me and definitely extended into just living my life outside of being on the mats practicing. We would always be told how to lead with this sense of extension. And when you practice that, so often it becomes a part of what you do. So when I talk about balance requires being proactive, it's this kind of like lead from your center, lead from a grounded place, and also lead with the extension of all of the universe. It is not just from your brain and you're not alone in it. You're definitely a part of something bigger, and you lead with that energy. This is an important part of the balance journey because it means that you are now in that real mindful practice of, okay, I've created my environment. I understand that balance is something that we're always seeking, that all things are seeking balance. And now you're knowing, how do I want to interplay with all the elements around me that are life elements? Because we're not just talking about maintaining balance in home life, but we're understanding now, how do I step out into the world and how do I apply this there? So for me, positive action, which is something I mentioned in the principles about Aikido, positive action doesn't mean that you're destroying the negative. And that's a key aspect of this perspective. If balance requires being proactive and you've got to take positive action, that's your role in it, then understanding that positive action does not mean taking away negative, then you just can totally take that off your shoulders. It's not your responsibility. If we understand, going back to principle number 2, that imbalances are going to start vibrationally. They have to play themselves out, and vibration is going to have to come to a place of rising to something better. Then, whether it's a physical situation, your physical body, or it's interactive situations in relationships, you are not trying to destroy the negative aspect of what is happening. You are accepting of it, but then you're saying, okay, positive means that I just got to figure out, how do I move forward? That's a positive movement. That's a positive action. How do I hold boundaries? That's a positive action. How do I expand the way I think, the way we think? And also, how do we release things, toxins and so forth, or miscommunications, or whatever it is that we're dealing with, so that we can make room for evolving and having some new perspectives and having new ways to then make forward movement, which is again positive action. So instead of making yourself crazy trying to stop everything bad from happening, you're going to focus on just finding that forward movement, holding boundaries, and figuring out ways to use balance, boundaries, and communication to establish, in a wider sense, an environment that's going to help you navigate through the challenge. And it's not necessarily always an attacker like we had when we were practicing Aikido, but if you put it in that same context, you're seeing opportunities to enter in and redirect the situation and being proactive in that, taking that positive action. And when there are times that you need an intention statement, consider this: I accept that balance requires being proactive. I'm willing to lead situations with positive action to facilitate better balance. I believe I am evolving through this. And just know that really, as you make it a practice to enter proactively into situations to create better balance, you are actually exuding a vibrational strength, a leadership that actually neutralizes so many potential situations. It's quite amazing in my own experience. So not everything is going to become an issue, but having this idea in your balance journey that when you are facing something that would make the best sense for you to just enter into it, be proactive on the front end, just know that you really are starting to build a foundation of balance that exudes beyond your own home life and your own personal experience. And at this point, if you're thinking, well, you would love for it to be easier to nurture balance without having to face challenges all the time and be having so much of it on your shoulders, at least, well, then I want to bring you to perspective number 5. Connection to spirit guarantees balance. So go inward for support. So this last perspective is something that depending on what you're listening to, depending on what you pursue, it's not necessarily something you're going to hear about a lot. Maybe you won't hear about it that much in relation to balance, or maybe you'll hear about it in like a religious situation in church and so forth, but not necessarily like in how does it apply in everyday life. But connection to spirit, guaranteeing balance, this is something that I feel is based in universal truth. And here are those principles. All beings have the gift of a spark of God, of spirit, within them. And it connects us with spirit, and it makes us equal to each other as human beings because we all have the same gift. We first have to accept it for ourselves. We can do so outside of any specific religion, and then we have to cultivate that connection. It's absolutely personal, it's 100% reliable, and no one can validate this but our own experience. Spirit is always helping us to find our way to improved balance or our center, and it's like true north on a compass. But we are actually the ones that are responsible for seeking its support, letting it guide us, and being willing to let spirit do the inner work that up-levels us to new vibrational levels of harmony and balance with the universe. So if you accept this universal truth principles, then wherever you are in embracing these things and leaning into them for yourself in your own journey, the way I think it applies is that we see all balance and all our self-development work as a partnership with spirit, that we're actually not alone in it. It's not just a mindset of, applying techniques that we learn from different things that we read, watch, or listen to. And we stop looking for a guru that's supposed to guide us through everything. We actually start seeking for the assurance and validation from that spirit within. And this is the part that I feel I had to do when my family decided to leave the church, and yet we did not leave our spiritual growth. We decided to make that a part of home life and eventually just individual pursuit. So I know it from personal experience, and I definitely will be sharing a video about that in the future, about how it really actually, leaving the church actually created so much more depth in my faith in the long run. But that was just my personal experience. I'm not telling anyone else to do that. I'm just saying that, you start seeking for that assurance and validation from spirit, and that's something that you can't really know for sure. Nobody's going to say, yep, you're on the right track, right? So then you really start engaging with like being mindful in all scenarios, and also intuitively and relationally listening and paying attention to whatever feedback you get for that sense of groundedness that helps you to deepen your trust in that connection that is there. And you just stop waiting for anyone else, in religion or otherwise, to make you feel whole. I think that's part of our balance journey, is we are seeking that sense of feeling whole. And not a lot of people are talking about the idea that, that's definitely going to be personal, but at the same time, it doesn't make us separated. It actually becomes the common personal experience, even though we each have our individualized aspects of what that looks like and, what our story is about it. But in our balance journey, if we're leaning into spirit's help to achieve balance and peace, first from within, and then, letting that guide us in what we're going to do and the steps we're going to take in our daily lives, well, especially in cases of mental and emotional health, this is very vital. No matter what kind of self-development work we're doing, the fact that mentally and emotionally, we can have old ways of thinking or old painful experiences that we just have not been able to let go of and resolve and just truly be at peace about. That's where the aspect of connecting to spirit will guarantee that balance. And again, like I said, it definitely requires willingness. It's an automatic foregone reality that we all are able to be connected. We already are connected, but we have to make a choice every day to lean into it and to say, I am willing. If we can say, I'm going through something, I don't like this suffering, and remind ourselves that a lot of times the suffering we're experiencing now is because wherever we were before, we didn't truly release that and allow ourselves to come to balance there. So now this is a little bit more of a harsh reality. And now we're again having the opportunity, okay, you can now come to balance. Then connecting to spirit and saying, I want more than anything to to ease my suffering. I want more than anything to really and truly mentally and emotionally be free from the pain that I've been holding on to. It allows for us to finally establish a new balance that we didn't have to do all the work for. You cannot mentally think yourself better. Again, I'll always tell you it's mind, heart, and spirit, and it's our thinking and our emotions are the part that we're super aware of, and then leaning into spirit and saying, help me with these things. All of that together is going to give us discernment in situations, and it is really true that we can ask and we will receive. But we've got to ask not for things to change and for us not to have to feel this way. We have to ask for new perspectives, ask for freedom from the burden that we've been holding on to emotionally or mentally. And we have to be willing to release that, to let spirit enter in and really dissolve it for us. It's asking for the wisdom to work with spirit, and we're saying, I really want to understand, how do I work with you? What do I need to give to you? And what parts do I need to do in my own experience here to establish the balance where it's needed? And, being that this is such internal work, it is so ambiguous and intangible that, it can feel very much like woo, woo, woo out there, but it's not. It's actually the vital piece in our balance journey. It's what makes balance the most possible in every situation and every stage of life. No matter where we are in a situation, no matter when we lean in, spirit meets us right there and moves us forward with our willingness. So in those times when you're facing something and you would like to really apply this perspective, here's an intention statement that could help. I accept that my connection to spirit guarantees more balance in my life. I am willing to lean into this mystery with trust and gratitude. I believe my balance journey is supported at all times. Okay, and as a final note, I'll just say that, this perspective might be the hardest to get on board with, depending on who you are and where you're at in life, because I know spiritual connection is personal and we all have our own vocabulary for it. So please don't get hung up on my vocabulary or my delivery on this subject. Just lean into the truth that your connection with the universal spirit is for everyone. It's not out there, it's within us. And remember that no one can give it to us. We have to acknowledge it for ourselves, and our own acknowledgement activates it. It's personal and it is alive and active all the time. So just leaning into that is going to make all the difference in our balance journey. It's going to underpin everything else we do. So in conclusion, let's review the 5 perspectives. All things are seeking balance. Imbalances start vibrationally. Balance is our natural state. Balance requires being proactive. And connection to spirit guarantees balance. Okay, so when you put all of those together, I really believe and have learned in my own experience that life definitely goes smoother. And relationships are going to be more wholehearted and fulfilling as you apply this in your own balance journey and in your relationships. And your own personal confidence and effectiveness really improves. Because in short, we are creating a ripple effect. Every effort we're making is radiating a steadiness that actually supports and influences others. So remember that the balance journey is something that we're doing anyway, naturally and intuitively. So we may as well be as conscious and intentional as we can be. And that's what I hope the Balance Journey channel can be for you. And so now it's your turn. I'm interested in hearing your thoughts about the things I shared today. Let me know in the comments if you have any feedback. And if this video has been helpful to you, please hit the thumbs up button to let me know. And I'll see you on the next video.